Welcome to our new episode of Xi Impression. I'm Rick.
I'm Sylvia. The highly anticipated third plenary session of the 20th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China is being held in Beijing.
This meeting is a landmark meeting, and I've seen a lot of international media coverage.
The 4-day Plenum examines issues related to further comprehensively deepening reform and advancing Chinese modernization.
In this episode, we delve into what comprehensively deepening reform is and why President Xi Jinping launched this campaign from the perspectives of our experts.
And also what has been achieved in the past decade and what our guests have to say about President Xi as a reformer.
The reform effort initiated by Deng Xiaoping is where China really begins to open to the world and construct the next major development stage of New China. We reach the new era that we associate with Xi Jinping. And at that time, it was clear that although reform and opening up would continue, that we needed a substantial new era of reforms, including things like the anti-corruption campaign, the tremendous reform and reorganization that President Xi brought to the Chinese military, consolidating the wealth gains, the national wealth gains, by ensuring that more people were lifted out of poverty. The real objective here is national rejuvenation. It's not some end of history model where you finally reach an endpoint and now we can sit on our laurels. Rather, there's always this pressing need to push forward, to stay current with the times, to meet the new needs. And as a result, we saw that there were a lot of pressing needs that had to be addressed. And this is why President Xi devoted himself to these ends.
It had to be deepened in the sense that China was not to remain a long time a low-wage manufacturing power, but had to leapfrog from stage to stage, emphasizing the development of science and technology to become a modern nation. So that the deepening comprehensiveness of this had to do with the extent, expanding it to the nation and expanding the content of the reform to create the basis for the full modernization of China. Well, I think he was very much in tune with the situation of the people in China. He had very deep roots in the nation as a whole.
What we saw when he took office were a number of pressing needs. We knew, for example, that sooner or later the high growth period of the Chinese economic development was coming to an end, and there needed to be important economic reforms. We knew that as China was rising as a major power, that it would likely run into increasing conflict with countries like the United States, which do not want any competitors when it comes to geopolitics.
Rick, among the many reforms led by Xi, which one has particularly left a strong impression on you?
I would say green development. I've seen the rapid development of China's clean energy, and the air quality and natural environment have greatly improved. So that's my first impression as a foreigner living in Beijing. What about you?
I would say it's poverty alleviation. If you had been to the poorest areas in China, you would have noticed how much lives have been changed in the past decade or so.
It's eliminated absolute poverty within China. It's got the fastest increase in average living standards of any country in the world by far. It is revolutionizing its energy supply in order to deal with the question of climate change. It's the world leader in renewable energy, and it's improving the education and health care, etc. It's no party in the world has got the achievements of the CPC in improving the conditions of lives of the people in its country. And President Xi is the latest stage of the CPC bringing about this achievement. He's tackling a new set of problems, which is, as I indicated, the transition of China to being a high-income society. And he's doing so extremely successfully.
Well, I think the most significant, obviously, was this poverty alleviation. What China has done is a major achievement on its own, but it has also shown to the world that this can be accomplished. If you have the right method, if you have the intention, if you have the political will to move further on that. So that was the most dramatic thing. One of the other things that just has to be noted is the initiation of the Belt and Road Initiative. This was not an internal reform per se. It was a combination of a good neighbor policy, but it was also a sign that China, as it developed, would be of beneficial importance for the rest of humanity.
President Xi brought China's opening up to a new level. He pushed forward the opening of the world's first import-themed national level expo.
I think the biggest result is China's own ability to drive innovation. The Chinese economy and the private enterprises have been known in the West for being, maybe following or sometimes copying Western products and not having their own innovative force, but this has changed dramatically.
I think that the key is when we put President Xi in his historical context, we understand, of course, that it's with Xi Jinping that we really understand him ushering China into this new position as a major power. So in this context, we can look at the reforms that he brought to governance, the anti-corruption campaign, cleaning up government, making it more efficient, setting the stage for tech innovation, and certainly deepening China's commitment to green development and green innovation to the point now that China is a global leader in this respect. But I think one of the things that we have to constantly come back to, that's something that really signaled early on the vision and the determination of President Xi was his decision to advance the Belt Road Initiative.
What China is doing under the direction of this reformer, Xi Jinping, is the move towards reforming international policy in such a way that you create new relationships between nations. And the notion of the community of shared interests, which has been based on much of Chinese ancient tradition, much of Confucian thinking, as well as more modern developments like the Bandung Conference and the 5 Principles of Coexistence, now are being put on the table as a means of reforming the international community in such a way that we can avoid wars and genocide and the dangers that we've experienced over the ages.
The achievements we've discussed wouldn't have been made without a strong leader. And that leader is President Xi Jinping.
One can imagine how challenging it is to drive such large-scale and intense reforms in a vast country like China. Some foreign observers even called it a mission impossible.
That, for sure, requires unwavering determination, immense courage, and extraordinary wisdom.
Let's hear from our experts who are familiar with China's reforms in the new era and see what they say about President Xi as a reformer.
Xi Jinping is definitely one of the most important reformers worldwide that we have seen over the last 50 years. And I think that means that you are looking here at Xi Jinping as one of the greatest statesmen of our period. I think history will recognize that. Why does Xi Jinping do this? I think it's basically in his own development. Many people talk about the influence of his father, who was a reformer, but I think it goes deeper than that. It goes to his own experiences, perhaps as a young man when he was dealing primarily with issues on a local level that has left a deep imprint on his character, and he has never left it. And I think that's the reason that he can do what he's doing now, is because he has these roots within the people who he had been working with all his life. And I think that's very unique in the way of political leaders. We see this maybe once in a generation.
Obviously, President Xi has conducted the latest phase of the development of this process. He's put forward a number of new ideas and new concepts, such as the common destiny of humanity, common prosperity, the development of new productive forces, etc. And these are the ideas which are necessary in order to take China through its new, more developed, successful economy. President Xi is highly successful. And I'm sure, therefore, one of the things that President Xi has said is that you shouldn't bring in new things until they can properly replace old things.
Change is very difficult. A lot of people, they don't want to go through the difficult work of having to change their behavior or change the certain comforts that they've accumulated over time. So it requires a very powerful determination, a clear act of drive, and I think, as President Xi was saying, even though it's going to invite a number of challenges and discomfort, if we don't do it, we're going to find ourselves increasingly exposed and vulnerable. So these are the reasons why he should be understood as a reformer. I think that President Xi has always been reform-oriented. Certainly, he emphasized the renewal of faith in the Communist Party, in Marxist principles. And he went back to the Yan'an legacy. He went back to the mass line. I think the reforms that President Xi is promoting are consistent with a vision of progress. What do we need to do to take the next step of realizing socialism with Chinese characteristics? What is it that we need to do to take the next step to realizing national rejuvenation? What is it that we need to do in order to realize the promise and potential of Chinese civilization, and to do that in a global context where people are learning to live together through peace and development? That's the underlying theme and purpose of the reforms that we see taking place in China.
China's reform is not going to stop. This is an ongoing process because there's the intent there that is cemented by the will of the Chinese people to become a major modern nation. Secondly, China, that has developed as economically, now realizes and has the right to become a major player on the world historical scene. Obstacles are often thrown up against them because of the desire of certain countries not to allow that to happen. Especially countries in the West. You have not only the commitment of China to become a major modern nation, but also there is the desire and the will of those other countries in the global South who are following to some extent in the path of China, looking at the Chinese model to develop their own economies, that they will not stand still at either. So it's really can't be stalled.
China's priority going forward is to achieve a high-quality growth with a greater shared prosperity. President Xi said in 2013 that China must pursue reform and opening up and cannot stop for one moment. That's why I believe China's reform cannot stop and will not stall. President Xi has steered China towards a future of Chinese modernization with greater confidence. And now China has achieved historic, systematically and holistic transformation in many, many fields. In the past 10 to 12 years,
China's reform will not stop, and Xi will not allow it to stop. Currently, there's a lot of global economic issues that are difficult to overcome. But I see a lot of global South countries working very well with China. I think China in itself is pushing ahead with reforms and growth.
The comprehensive reforms is that this is a continual process in developing the nation. And it doesn't stop at a particular stage, but it continues to move on.
I think we always have to recall that China is 20% of the world's population. China is the major trading partner of most countries in the world. China is playing an instrumental role in helping the global South develop. So therefore, whatever is good for China is good for that part of the world that wants peace and development.
I know in the history of the Communist Party of China, the third plenary sessions have usually been quite significant.
For instance, the third plenary session of the 11th CPC Central Committee in 1978 initiated China's reform and opening up.
And the important meeting in 2013 was also considered a milestone event.
And I believe this third plenary session will also be epoch-making, yielding significant outcomes and sending important signals.
Looking forward to it.
Well, I think there will be obviously messages sent out to the world that the reform process is continuing.
And there's no quick fix, I believe. but there's a lot of longer term solutions that the third plenary session will probably come up with, I believe.
I am entirely confident that the plenum will do what all the previous ones have done, which is resolve the new issues and new challenges which are created by China's new, much higher level development